for the Wendi show, jazz hands and all. I wish I could merge us so we could be less of a weirdo.
I think Wendy's working on a bigger story about what it means for her to be authentic. Why does she laugh in the face of trauma? Does everyone? Or is Wendi wearing a mask she wants to take off?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wendy's most shocking moments and quotes throughout the murder of Dan Markel, through the trials, and through her writings and her quotes in the trials and her testimony and her interrogations. I have compiled some of the things that are the most shocking, and up to this date, it's happening on the regular, on the daily almost. So it's hard to keep up, but I did have a list of Wendy's most shocking quotes from her book, and I do have a series called Wendy's Lies that is interesting and you might want to check out. A lot of people have been making really interesting points, and I agree with them so much. And my heart goes out to the Markels, and I want to keep everything respectable and light, but also not mistaking the severity of this tragedy in the murder of Dan Markel. And just want to start by talking about some of the things that are pretty standard shocking moments from Wendi, like the drive-by and then the allegedly setting up Jeffrey Lacoste to be the fall guy, changing the boys' names, alienating the boys from the Markels, wearing a severely inappropriate dress to a religious ceremony as of recently. Her entire book, the writing class podcast, and wearing the same dress in the first two trials, saying her brother is handsome, not speaking to her family in the jail or on the wiretaps, which is pretty strategic, having a very, very expensive famous lawyer who's seemed to kind of negotiate things for her pretty well. And I just wanted to mention, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but some of these things just keep making us scratch our heads as to what is the holdup. I want to say the most famous line from Wendy's interrogation. If somebody tried to kill my ex-husband, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I mean, it would be different if I thought it was my brother. And that was incredibly brought up by Georgia Kappelman as one of the most incriminating lines, and has made Wendi Adelson infamous to this day. And in the first trial, another infamous comment was, the state isn't going to decide to arrest me, when asked by Tara Kawas how she felt if the state were to arrest her. This is not what this video is about. This video is about some of Wendy's most shocking quotes from her book and on this writing class podcast. And I definitely want to share first with you some of these quotes from her writing class radio podcast, which was episode 6, season 1. I think if you like these quotes, write in the comments below if you'd like to hear a breakout video more from this podcast and actual recordings.
We learn a lot about the narrator. We learn how smart she is. We learn how much she's done in this time. Something that I was curious about, if there's something in there that is causing her not to be able to really get any sympathy, or if she feels like she's not getting sympathy because it was an ex, or she's not allowed to grieve him. I'm so curious to see how the grieving process went.
It's not sentimental. It's just reported.
As horrible as the experience was, I mean, it was sort of, I was happy at the end when she said that, and she talked about them living with her family and their family. I mean, it made me, on some level, feel, I mean, I don't know, at least happy. Yeah. I mean,
less uneasy.
I think it's okay for us to feel uneasy for a long time.
in as readers or as listeners to this story, so I wouldn't want the narrator to worry about us. The thing that I think this story is really about, and it might change, but I think it's about, the line that really struck me is, I don't get to complain because I'm alive. It was hard to not ask personal questions, and it was hard to not ask detailed questions about the crime, like who murdered her ex-husband and why. But we're not the podcast Serial. She hinted at not feeling like she can publicly express how she really feels.
In regards to Dan Markel's death, she says, I don't get to complain because I'm alive. In regards to their divorce, she says, first we got divorced, then he got murdered. And then she goes on, this is the most famous line, late ex-spouse sounds like latex spouse. And talking about getting married young and her whole marriage to Dan Markel, she says, I thought I could cheat the system and marry a man I lacked passionate love for. And then as she goes on to talk about having children, she says, our marriage dissolved after the kids arrived and the loneliness of being married to someone who didn't see me as an equal crept in. And then talking about her book in regards to how Dan Markel felt about it, she says, he didn't like fiction, so why read my novel? She goes on to talk about his death over and over again. She said, it feels sacrilegious these days to even suggest something non-heroic about my latex husband because he was murdered. And then she says, he died violently and young and likely at the hands of a professional killer. And then going on to talk about the media, she says, the media had a field day in response. I turned on the news to find Nancy Grace with photos of my kids. George Stephanopoulos saying my name in reference to our acrimonious divorce. A picture a friend took when I was her maid of honor as why I should be treated like a murder suspect. And then she goes on to talk about when random strangers ask her about her life or if she has a husband. She said they ask, what does your husband do? I haven't yet said he doesn't do much because he's dead, but I think it sometimes. I find when I tell people my children's father died, they feel sad. When they ask the follow-up questions and find out we weren't married, they seem to feel better, but I don't. And then she goes on to talk about Donna. She says, I try to draw boundaries with my mother because there aren't any. She is caring for my children right now so that I can be in this class, more like a co-parent than a grandmother. Most people think I am happy all of the time because I smile constantly. I think this face is a mask that I wear out of endless practice, like a kind of muscle memory for the face. Is it authentic or inauthentic if I am a person who likes to smile at the news of something tragic? Am I deluding myself or others if I smile and laugh through the pain of a terrible time? Danny used to tell me that everyone thought I was such a nice person and such a good person, but he was the only one who knew the truth of what a bad person I was. He was convinced that I had deluded everyone but him. This year, I told my small children that their father was dead and he was never coming back. Why do I have to reserve the written word for a place where I can accurately and painfully express myself, and the real life version for the Wendi show, jazz hands and all? I wish I could merge us so we could be less of a weirdo. I want to move on to Wendy's book. I want to read some of the most incriminating quotes. Georgia did such a wonderful job of picking out such amazing quotes that really framed this whole murder for hire plot and the state's theory that the Adelson'S were all in on this together. And I definitely want to say everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but Wendy's book just kind of paints a picture, and I want to go ahead and share some of the quotes, some that were used in the trial, but most of them I'm not sure if you all have heard before, so I just picked out some of the most interesting ones and shocking ones to me. On page 3, Wendi as author writes, as Lily, the main character, and most of these quotes are from Lily. Just as a side note, she says, Mom advised, go to law school and find a good husband. On page 15, Lily says, sometimes falling in love means doing things you wouldn't otherwise do when sober. I can think of no other explanation for the ways I've somehow agreed to change my life. Since I met Joshua Stone, I have no other reason to explain how I ended up smack dab in the Florida Panhandle. Page 17. We moved to this godforsaken place for Josh's career. Page 38. We had a television that played 3 channels. Page 39. This Hiawassee Springs idea was just a small stop on the way back to what we had previously known as civilization. Page 40. Lily Billy Goat is a pet name. Josh calls me. I tolerate it because it makes him happy. Now I understand why my office mate used to pretend to puke into a garbage can every time Josh called me at work. Page 75. When not building new defenses against my husband, who might secretly be plotting to leave me, I divide my time these days between caring for my clients and trying to find new sources of funding to keep our operation afloat. Page 75. I had a dream. Josh and I were living in Greenland, and I was pregnant with triplets. After they were born, Josh's family moved to Greenland to help us take care of the kids. I couldn't handle it, so I skipped town with a local pilot, and we moved to the part of Alaska where we spent half of the year bathed in light and half of the year shrouded in darkness. I liked the pilot well enough, but still missed Josh and the kids growing up in Greenland without me. Page 96 is of the character Mila, from the character Mila's perspective. Chico, are we doing a production of Chicago? Is it the one where I'm going to be the older woman who kills her husband? Or the new one? Oh, I bet I'm the new one because she's blonde. It's a great role. Page 100. I still haven't talked to Josh about the Cornell letter. I have, however, exploded at him for a million other reasons that have nothing to do with his impending dash for the North. Years of therapy have taught me that in situations like this, it is best to blame my mother. Page 101. I feel guilty for having a loving husband that doesn't abuse me. And I appreciate that Josh doesn't actively abuse me. But I do wonder sometimes if he understands me at all. He talks about how much he loves me, and he certainly is affectionate, but I constantly wonder whether he just needed someone to come with him to Hiawassee Springs, and whether I just seemed like the most willing idiot. He is withdrawn. He never seems to want to talk about our relationship, and sometimes I feel like I don't know him any better now than the day that we met. Page 106. I have moved far away from my family and all my friends, and I'm afraid of raising a child here. We will send holiday cards with pictures of us and our children smiling and laughing and playing in our yard, and we'll become every other boring suburban family. What is happening to us? Page 123. Josh says to Lily, "But I am your husband, and I need your love," he shouted at me. Page 124. I tried with everything I had not to laugh at him. It's not something I'm proud of, but it is definitely a flaw. As a child, I never got in trouble in school except for 1 or 2 times. In the 2nd grade and once in 11th, where I descended into an uncontrollable laughter, and the teachers forced me to leave the classroom and to return only when I could control myself. I thought back to the laughter, but I felt the corners of my mouth turning into a smirk, and I knew things were going straight downhill, and I lost it. Page 154, Lily says, I learned about Stockholm Syndrome, where victims of hostage situations or kidnappings come to positively associate themselves with their captors and even sometimes love the very people who keep them captive. On page 202, Wendi writes, as Lily, it's true in my family. You either become a lawyer or a doctor. And well, I knew right around 7th grade when I refused to dissect Skippy the Frog, I had named and befriended in biology class. And I was able to construct solid arguments on why the dissection practice was barbaric and refused to participate. And I was likely to end up in the lawyer camp of the Walkers. Page 216. Josh was tired of me now that I couldn't give him children he always wanted. Maybe he'd like to run off with one of his students. Well, fine. I didn't need to stay with him in this crappy Creighton-infested house with his bad cooking and monosyllabic interactions. Page 217. That's because we built a love like a house of cards. No support, pulled away from our support systems. We just couldn't make it work for each other. We weren't strong enough. And then Wendi writes in the About the Author section at the end of the book, I selfishly wanted you to know a bit about my story, which was much, but not all in common with attorney Lily, so that if you are one of those lucky people who has the luxury to spend many years focused on higher education, you will think about law school, and you will consider spending your life as an advocate for those whose voices have been taken from them. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching and liking and subscribing. I've requested more records for Charlie's prison records and Donna Adelson's Leon County Jail records. So more videos to come, more jail records and prison records to come. Thank you so much for watching and liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful day.